Welcome back to Old Soul Stories. Tonight we leave China and travel west and south across the mountain passes of Central Asia, through the great plains of the subcontinent until we arrive in Delhi. In the 13th century, in the courtyard of a Sufi shrine lit by 100 oil lamps, where a young poet sits at the feet of his master and is about to hear something that will take him the rest of his life to fully understand. His name is Amir Khusrau, and tonight he is going to tell us something about love that no psychologist, no philosopher, no self-help book has ever managed to say as precisely or as beautifully in the 7 centuries since he wrote it. He is going to tell us about the river. Amir Khusrau was born in 1253, just 46 years after Rumi. He was a poet, a musician, a Sufi mystic, and a disciple of one of the greatest spiritual masters of the medieval world, Nizamuddin Auliya of Delhi. He wrote in Persian, in Hindi, in multiple languages simultaneously, blending them into something that had never existed before. He invented Qawwali, the devotional music that is still sung at Sufi shrines across Pakistan and India today. 700 years later, he served 7 different rulers of the Delhi Sultanate. He outlived most of the people he loved, and when his master Nizamuddin finally died, Khusrau followed him within 6 months, as if life without his teacher was not something his body was interested in continuing. He was, by any measure, a man who understood love, not the comfortable kind, not the kind that arrives as planned and stays as long as you need it. The other kind, the kind that runs in strange directions. One day, sitting by the Yamuna River with his master, Khusrau wrote 2 lines, just 2 lines, in Hindi and Persian mixed together, the way he always wrote 2 languages braided into one truth. And those 2 lines have been sung at Sufi shrines and memorized by lovers and quoted by poets across 7 centuries because they say something that every human being who has ever loved another human being, or loved God, or loved life itself, has felt in their bones without ever quite finding the right words for. Here are the 2 lines. Listen carefully, not with your mind, with whatever is deeper than your mind. Oh, Khusrau, the river of love runs in strange directions. One who jumps into it drowns, and one who drowns gets across. Let us stay with this for a moment, because there is more here than first appears. Much more. The river of love runs in strange directions. Not the direction you planned, not the direction logic suggests, not the direction that makes sense when you look at it from the bank with dry feet and clear eyes. Love does not go where you expect it to go. It runs backward. It runs sideways. It runs uphill against gravity, through terrain that has no name on any map, toward destinations that you cannot see from where you are standing. Anyone who has loved deeply and honestly knows this to be true, not as a metaphor, but as a lived physical reality. The heart goes where it goes. And where it goes is almost never where the mind would have sent it if the mind had been consulted first. The river of love runs in strange directions. This is not a complaint. Khusrau is not saying that love is chaotic or unreliable or a source of suffering that should be avoided. He is saying something more precise and more honest. He is saying that love has its own logic, a logic that is more complete and more intelligent than the logic of the planning mind, but is simply operating at a level that the planning mind cannot access. The river knows where it is going. You just cannot see it from where you are standing. Now, the second part. And this is where the paradox lives. This is where Khusrau earns his place among the greatest wisdom teachers who ever wrote a word. One who jumps in drowns. Think about what this means. The person who jumps into the river of love with confidence and technique, and the full intention of swimming to the other side, this person drowns. This is the person who approaches love as a project to be managed. The person who enters a relationship with a strategy, with clear expectations, with carefully maintained defenses, with one part of themselves always held back in reserve in case things do not go as planned. The person who loves with conditions, even generous and well-intentioned conditions. The person who gives but keeps a careful internal account of what has been given and what has been received. The person who is in the river but is working very hard not to be changed by it. This person drowns, not as punishment, not because love is cruel, but because the river of love is not a problem to be solved by superior swimming technique. The current that moves this river is not impressed by your strength or your strategy or the careful way you have positioned your arms. It has been moving since before you were born, and it will be moving long after you are gone, and it does not particularly care about your plan for getting to the other side. And one who drowns gets across. The person who surrenders, who steps into the river without a strategy for surviving it, who allows the current to take them wherever it goes without fighting to redirect it toward a predetermined destination, who gives up the careful accounting of what has been given and what has been received, who loves without the small protective part of the self, always watching from a safe distance to make sure nothing gets out of hand, who is changed by the river rather than trying to change the river. This person, the one who has given up swimming, arrives on the other side, transformed, but arrived. Now, I want to be very careful here, because this teaching is easy to misunderstand in a way that causes real harm. Khusrau is not saying that you should stay in relationships that damage you. He is not saying that surrender means accepting mistreatment or abandoning your needs, or dissolving yourself entirely into another person until you disappear. That is not surrender. That is self-erasure. And it is not what any Sufi master in the history of this tradition has ever taught. What Khusrau is pointing at is something more subtle and more specific. He is pointing at the particular form of control that the defended self exercises even in genuine love. The way we hold back, the way we measure, the way we protect ourselves from the full impact of another person's reality by keeping a part of ourselves permanently behind glass, where it cannot be touched or changed or surprised. The way we love with most of ourselves, while keeping a small but crucial part in reserve. It is that reservation, that last carefully maintained distance, that is the swimming. And it is the release of that reservation, the willingness to be fully in the river, fully present, fully available to be changed by what love actually is, rather than what we planned for it to be. That is the drowning that gets you across. Nizamuddin Auliya once said to his students, "The path of love is not for the faint-hearted. It asks everything, not most things, everything. But what it gives in return is not what you went in expecting to receive. What it gives is something you could not have named from the bank." Think about the relationships in your own life where you have been swimming, where you have been in the river but working very hard to control your trajectory, keeping your head above the current, maintaining your direction, protecting yourself from being taken somewhere you had not planned to go. Think about what that swimming cost you. The energy of it, the loneliness of it, the particular exhaustion of being in love and simultaneously managing your exposure to love. And then think, if there is someone or something in your life where you have ever stopped swimming, even briefly, even accidentally, where the current took you and you let it and you arrived somewhere you could not have reached by your own effort, what that felt like, how different it was from the swimming. That is the river Khusrau is describing. The Zen tradition says, "Let go or be dragged." The Tao Te Ching says, "The soft overcomes the hard." yield, and overcome. Jesus says, "Whoever loses their life will find it." Every wisdom tradition in the history of the human species has pointed at this same paradox from a different direction, that the way to arrive is not to fight the current, that the way to keep something is not to grip it, that the way to be transformed by love is not to manage your transformation but to allow it. Khusrau said it in 2 lines. By a river in Delhi, 700 years ago. The river of love runs in strange directions. Trust the strange direction. One who jumps in drowns. Stop jumping. Stop the technique. Stop the strategy. Stop the careful management of how much of yourself you are willing to risk. One who drowns gets across. Let the river take you. Let yourself be changed. Let love be what it actually is, rather than what your fear says it should be limited to. Psychology has a name for what happens when human beings do this, when they fully surrender the defended self in the context of genuine intimacy. They call it secure attachment. They call it ego dissolution. They call it the moments of deepest human connection, the moments that people consistently name as the most meaningful experiences of their lives, when the boundary between self and other became temporarily permeable, and something passed between 2 people that could not be described in the language of strategy or management or careful allocation of emotional resources. Khusrau called it getting across. Young Khusrau sat by the Yamuna River long after his master had gone to sleep. The city glowed across the dark water. The Qawwali singers were still singing faintly in the courtyard behind him, their voices carrying across the water, mixing with the sound of the river, becoming part of it. He looked at the river running in its strange directions in the moonlight. He thought about his master's eyes, eyes that were simultaneously completely present and completely elsewhere, the eyes of someone who had stopped swimming a long time ago and had been on the other side ever since. He thought about love, about all the ways he had approached it like a river to be crossed rather than a current to be trusted. And he picked up his pen and he wrote 2 lines. And somewhere in a shrine in Delhi, 700 years later, the shrine is still there. The Qawwali is still being sung. Those 2 lines are still being heard by people who have been swimming for years, who are exhausted by the swimming, who have begun to suspect, in the quietest part of themselves, that the technique is not working and that something else is being asked of them. Something simpler, something harder, something that has a name in every language and has been described in every tradition and has been felt by every human being who has ever stood at the edge of a river and looked at the far bank and wondered whether they were brave enough. Not brave enough to swim, brave enough to drown. If this story found you at the right moment, if somewhere in it you recognized a river you have been swimming in for a long time, share it with someone who needs to hear that. The drowning is not the end. It is the crossing. Subscribe to Old Soul Stories. Every Thursday, one story from somewhere in the ancient world. One truth carried across centuries to reach the specific shape of your specific life at this specific moment. And until then, watch the river. Trust the strange direction. And when you are ready, stop swimming.